and the Refugees, a book by Andrea Chalupa, is something that we're talking about today in commemoration of the Holodomor week. And in the first half, we talked a bit more of that overview and some of the history, and there's reasons why things are the way they are today. And if we drew a parallel between the refugees from whatever country, and if we use Syria as an example, the same thing can apply to Ukraine from 1932-33 to any time after that. But what is your opinion about food maybe used as a weapon in terms of starvation and so on, and oppression? Do you see a similarity with the Syrian refugees and what's happened in Ukraine?
Absolutely, in the sense that we were too late. The West was too late. They, same with the news of the famine didn't trickle out from Ukraine until, on a massive level, until millions had already perished. And so as you see now with Syria, the world is waking up to it when they went with a little baby being washed up on the shore. And we're just too late on Syria. And so it's just the West likes to pretend that these problems don't exist and that we can continue doing business with these dictators, but you can't, because it catches up with you eventually.
When you looked at this book, originally from that 1946 to 49 era when it was released, was there a reason that it never really captured the hearts and minds of people? It was a different time, I give you that. But in terms of, we have a generation from the university now, younger people who are far more in tune than I ever was, with print media and social media. What was it about this? I'm familiar with Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. We studied that. But something like this, where did you find it and how did you pick up on that?
Thank you for that question, because it was quite an adventure to write that book. And so the book actually came out of a screenplay. When I was a university student myself, I was procrastinating writing my honors thesis in history by researching the world of the journalists in Moscow who were living the high life in exchange for publishing Kremlin lies about the workers' paradise. And I thought, who were these men to do this, to sell their souls to Stalin? And the more I researched, the more I realized that, oh my God, these guys are fabulous in the sense that they lived these lavish lives. So Walter Duranty, who was the chief among them, he lived inside the Kremlin, had a Russian mistress, through the most decadent parties with opium and orgies. And I'm like, this is the best villain for a movie. This should be a movie. And so I went on that chaotic adventure of attempting to write and produce a Hollywood-style screenplay to introduce Stalin's genocide to a broader audience. And of course, no producer wants a script that depressing about genocide, and so I had to find some sort of angle on it. And so for inspiration, I read Animal Farm. And it was in reading Christopher Hitchens' introduction to Animal Farm, where he just said 2 sentences, how Orwell struggled to get Animal Farm published. No one wanted it. It was considered radical. Stalin was our great ally at the time. But a small press put out some copies, and one miraculously ended up in the hands of Ukrainian refugees who understood immediately what he was trying to say. And they wrote to Orwell in London and worked together to produce Animal Farm in Ukrainian from the refugee camps, and the truth was then getting out. And to me, I was like, that's my happy ending of my screenplay. So I incorporated Orwell's story and the story of the refugees into my otherwise very dismal script about the success of Stalin's information war during the famine. But you do see at the end of my film, and there's no spoiler, it's historical, that Animal Farm is coming out in the world and the tide is turning, people are waking up. And amazingly, when I said all this I just told you to over dinner to my uncle, who spent time in the refugee camp when his family was fleeing the Nazis and the Soviets and heading west, my uncle looked at me and said, oh, I have a copy of that refugee camp Ukrainian translation of Animal Farm. I picked up one when I was a kid. And so keep in mind, my uncle, as an immigrant, could only take what he could carry when he went by ship to New York City, and he chose to take Animal Farm. That's how much the book meant to him. And then he gifted it to me.
So kind of along the lines of Anne Frank, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of history that one can draw in terms of how unfathomable it can be in terms of totalitarianism and that kind of oppression. When you were over in Ukraine for a while, and what happened there?
So I was in Ukraine a few times. I lived there for a couple months right after the Orange Revolution, and then I was most recently there over the summer for a couple weeks. I will say that Kiev never ceases to amaze me. It's increasingly culturally diverse. You see a ton of young people. You see a lot of young people with investigative journalists with their own show on television. They're serving in the government. They're launching tech startups. They're launching hedge funds. It's really the young generation that grew up in independence, that grew up with the internet, and they saw how the rest of the world was living, and they wanted to live free like that. And they're an incredibly creative and energetic generation. And so it's not the Animal Farm of their parents' generation, grandparents, that's for sure.
Saskatoon has a twin city, Chernivtsi, in Ukraine, and there's been a fairly strong bond with exchanges and tours and so on, including government officials who've been back and forth. Connor, in terms of what you're seeing on campus and just in Saskatoon and area in general, there's been some efforts with the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, the Ukrainian Canadian Professional and Business Association. What are you seeing amongst the university crowd in terms of their level of interest with the motherland, if you will?
For me, I find the interest only increases with every single year. I guess Ukrainian student groups have existed in Saskatoon since 1954, but it ebbs and flows, it comes in waves. And so I recently started this group back in 2011. It was a tiny little group with 4 people running it, just trying to get our feet off the ground. And now today we have over 50 members, 14 people in the executive. People are just getting more and more interested. And a lot of people here in Saskatchewan, because about 14% of us even have a Ukrainian background. For a lot of us, it's a sense of rediscovery and just kind of learning a lot more about a culture, because it's really shocking by how many people don't grow up knowing about the Holodomor. A lot of people in rural schools often don't hear about it. If there's someone that doesn't know about it, then it might not even get covered. So for a lot of people, their eyes are opening. They're like, oh my gosh, did this actually happen? And it's really good that we have so many programs at the university, through the Perry Center for the Study of Ukrainian Heritage, the PCUH. They offer amazing programs and lectures, and we're just constantly working together to do as much as we possibly can to raise interest, and it's really showing through the participation of students.
So bring that to a level in the wider community sense. If I'm watching any particular station in the news, you mentioned several from the States and so on, what type of assurances do I have that I'm getting facts and balance? Is that up to me to do my homework, or am I picking a station and running with it? How will I learn to do that on my own?
It's up to you to study history. It's up to all of us to study history, because none of these events are happening in a vacuum. The reason why Putin even exists is because it's the unfinished business of World War II. We used one monster, Stalin, to get rid of the other monster, Hitler. That still left us with a monster. And now that monster has been boosting up Assad, who's been killing far more Syrians than ISIS. So, it's up to all of us. If you want to understand the headlines and not be tricked into believing Putin propaganda or ISIS propaganda, you just have to study history.
And when I'm doing that, you mentioned fact-checking in terms of the background of any of these publications and where they're coming from. I can probably choose the wrong one, not having any strong background in history. Are there checks and balances that I can use in terms of getting the information about the Holodomor out there, that this in fact did happen, and I think that's important to touch on? What would I look for?
Well, you want to really look, oh my gosh, it's very hard, because I can tell you, even during the revolution, I remember reading an article from CNN by a reporter stuck at a desk in Atlanta who had no idea what she was talking about, and she was telling the whole story of the revolution from the perspective of the poor riot police who were beating protesters. And that's what you're dealing with, is with this digital disruption of the media industry, all music and all the other industries are feeling this. Newsrooms are shrinking, investigative units are shrinking because investigative journalism is so expensive, so we have less reporters on the ground at a time when we desperately need them, so it's very, very rough. So you just I don't know, you just have to read widely, read a lot of different sources. Definitely New York Times, Washington Post. You just have to be very careful who you trust.
I guess there's 2 questions I'd like to close on, and one is, why is the Holodomor so important to recognize and to talk about? And secondly, what can you leave us with that we as a community and across Western Canada, what can we talk about on a go-forward basis?
Well, I will say the Holodomor for me is an incredibly personal story because my grandfather, Alexei, lived through it, and he described in his memoir, which is the excerpt is in my book, of seeing a woman, a mother, dead on the side of the road. Her body, she'd just starved to death, and her 2-year-old infant baby was pawing at her, trying to wake her up. Didn't understand that she was gone. So to me, just that story alone is why people need to be aware of the Holodomor. There are millions of lives like that perished in this famine by Stalin, and Stalin has been resurrected under Putin. It's very clear. And if you care about human rights, if you believe that we are all connected, then we must honor what happened under Stalin with this famine, and we must do that as well by helping Ukrainians in their fight for democracy today.
I think that's a big takeaway, and if I've learned anything today, it's to expand my news sources and not be so married to one particular source and feed. Connor, thank you so much for the work that you've done at the university, and Andrea, I wish you safe travel back home, and thank you for making time for us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah. That's our show for today. I'd like to thank Andrea Chalupa and Connor Moen. I want to thank all of you for watching. We'll see you next time on Connect. I'm Randy Shabilo.